So that leads us to Russia. The biggest clue that's happened over the last couple of weeks. This is the biggest clue that something was imminent and probably, can I just use that safely, probably going to happen, is that the yacht that presumably belongs to Putin has left the port of Hamburg, Germany. According to the paper bill, this is likely an escape due to the fear of confiscation of sanctions go into effect. So Russia, Putin is one of the richest men in the world. Some say he is the richest man in the world. He's got this huge yacht. I probably should have got a picture. Let's go just for fun. Want to do that? Got a minute? This will be fun. I don't know why I didn't think about this. I didn't know. Yeah, captive audience. So yeah, it'll be fun to just kind of. Oh, there we go. Look at this big monster. So we'll just pin this up here for fun, huh? So yeah, so I wonder if there's like, you open these doors and these missiles come up out of it. It's got torpedo doors. That's not a little boat. Yeah, and you go down. That's probably 100 to 150 yards max back to that house, maybe. Yeah, it's not that far. So you can tell that boat is huge. That's a big boat. So the idea here is that Putin says, "Move my yacht," So because and anybody who's paying attention is looking at this kind of stuff. Now they're looking at other big things, of course, but when he's starting to cover his assets, then I didn't mean for that to be anything but that. So you all just. But when he starts to move his assets around and to cover them, protect them, you can see that, wow, okay, see, he's pulling the trigger on all this. He's the head, he's Magog. So President Andrzej Duda, this is probably the most difficult time since 1989 for the entire community of the West, for NATO, for the EU. The very intense actions of the Russian troops pointing to the possibility of an invasion of the Ukraine, the ongoing maneuvers, all this indicates the need for joint action. Now, I was gone for a week, and every day, of course, I'm looking at it, and every day, the troops just kept coming west. They just kept coming by trains, mostly by trains, convoys on trains, and if China wanted to invade the East, it'd be a good time. They've emptied quite a bit from the east and moved it west. So here is, now I just threw this up here just at the last minute, but here's the Russian exclave, they call it. An enclave is something that's tight. This is an exclave, and it's kind of, it's on the northern sea, of course, there, up by Denmark. And this is, Russia owns this little piece of property. And they've moved Su-35s into here. So they're threatening the West, don't do something stupid. And those are nuclear. And they can carry, nuclear missiles and stuff. So they're saying, don't do something stupid. We're gonna take care of business down here. Here's the warning. And the ships coming into the Baltic, they've traversed. Russia and the U.S. has a treaty, which have all kind of been busted now. One of the treaties is the Russians cannot bring their submarines, in particular, around through the Mediterranean Sea and into the Bosporus for anything but repair. And yet, so a couple months ago, they said, okay, we've got some submarines coming through, and they're going for repair. What's interesting that they just returned to the Black Sea right now. Well, wow, that's really interesting how they can kind of coordinate the timing of the repair of those nuclear subs. So I threw this in here. I was going to use this up further, but watch what Biden says. I'm going to work like the devil to bring gas prices down. Now, let's see. The devil is the father of lies. He's going to work like the devil. I know we've used that through our lifespan. Work like the devil, but and look, the facts is that we're in a situation now, you should have peace of mind. Are you kidding me? Now tell that to I know he's the commander-in-chief of the United States, but he's sending huge messages to the world. Afghanistan, you can't depend on us, even though we stepped out to help you. And these others. And so he's sending this to the American people now. You should have peace of mind. The oil's going through the roof. There's a threat of war. We look like clowns in the Middle East and elsewhere. It's very disturbing. Now, actually, Amir reminded me, he had a map. This is a different one. Amir's update, and I didn't get to watch it all, but they showed a picture of the pipelines coming out of Russia, and I've showed this before. You remember this. All of these pipelines run west. All these pipelines are coming out of Siberia and eastern Russia and northern Russia, and they all run west because they are exporters. They don't import oil. They export. And they have the West like this. Notice that there aren't a lot of, now there's gas lines actually going west, going south and some, but almost all of those actually are moving west as well, and they're moving into Turkey and across the Med that way. And then, of course, down over to Lebanon, down to Egypt, up along the coast of Israel. There's a new one that went up there. So Russia says, well, we stopped our exports there at the border of Turkey. And I believe that they want the imports to come from the south and meet right there in Syria. Syria is a huge hub. It's a huge hub for the gas lines, oil lines, and the such. And if they can this makes interesting context here, that the intersection of the imports, exports for Russia are right there in Turkey and especially Syria and Iraq. That's a hub, if you will, for pipelines coming north and south and west. So, just a thought there. Real briefly, Macron and Putin met the other day. They set apart from each other by a mile. I think I had that picture there. I want to show you there. So there they are sitting together. They're sitting together. They're not sitting together. Together. Yeah, together. And so now, and then when they walk out, Putin walks out way ahead of Macron. When it ended, he stood up and he went and waved kind of like, see you later, and left. Now, and we showed you a few years ago when Macron came in, remember, what was that magazine that showed him as the Messiah, and then people drowning and stuff, and he's kind of their savior. He's the savior. He's not the savior. And again, Amir today, in fact, every time he talks about Macron, he'll say Macron is a nobody. He doesn't have any kind of power, and he does not. He's going to start wielding it. He's going to start playing a part. And I want to remind you that he is part of an empire, not an empire, of a once empire. Remember, they owned how much of Africa? They had a bunch of Africa and other parts of the world, like the UK did. And France is a key member of EU, and France, Germany, UK in particular, those three run a lot of the EU. And so this guy, this little man, has a lot of power he just doesn't really know how to use it and those kinds of things. So, and it's growing. I'll show you what I mean by that. Kremlin denies Putin told Macron there will be no new maneuvers near Ukraine. So when they met, Macron came out and said, okay, there's not going to be any more maneuvers, and there's going to be, and he said some other things. I can't remember all that he said. And Putin came out and said, I didn't say that. Basically, Russians are coming out and saying, I didn't say that. French President Macron asserts he has clear commitments from Zelensky and Putin to implement the Minsk agreements. Macron also says Putin promised him he would not trigger an escalation, nor keep troops in Belarus after joint exercises end. I think the problem is they're speaking different languages. It's French and Russian. So there's a big problem there. The CIA intercepts Russian message to generals to invade Ukraine on Wednesday. Now, when I first saw this report, I actually saw one that said Tuesday, and now I've seen at least two that said Wednesday. And so now there's more reports saying, there was one report, this one here in particular, that says that they intercepted a message that this is going to happen Wednesday. And so the question is, and this idea was coming up, like China's having their games out there. And so Putin's probably going to wait. And this is, I've had this discussion with a few people, and that seems kind of to make sense if they want to be friends, but what does Russia want? I'll tell you what Russia wants. They want to get on the ground when it's frozen, and they don't want China or anybody else to have preeminence in the world. Putin wants to be calling the shots. So he doesn't want the West sitting in front of their TVs, having fun with the games. He has been doing this for months to say, I'm coming. And again, just the latest news. I saw Amir saying, and he pointed this out, and I've seen pictures already of this, but he made a good statement that these Russian helicopters were coming and they lined up along on the other side of the Ukrainian border. And that was to say, we're here, we are right here. And there was one flight, 25 helicopters, but there was many flights, multiple flights of helicopters coming from the east to the west and setting up. We're going to get into more of what's happening there. So Ukraine is on edge. Blinken warns Russia of a resolute, massive, and united transatlantic response. Okay, and this picture, and again, this is a decent news site, but they've got missiles flying over there. Well, those are just going to be Russians and Ukrainians. But it's going to be Russian helicopters shooting Ukrainians, and the United States and the West is not going to shoot back. Now, you say, Raymond, are you a prophet? No, I'm not, because it could happen. And if it does, it's World War III. So that's why I'm saying it won't. Nobody wants a world war. Russians have the latest, I think 135,000 troops on the border of the north and the east and the south. And they've got pockets of resistance inside Ukraine and Moldova. And of course, they basically own Belarus. So what's this response? Well, it's going to be money. And I already showed you Putin's yacht. I don't think he's concerned about money. And I'll tell you what else he's not concerned about. Money. Because oil is at a 95. I haven't looked today. I should have. It was at 90 or 95. It's probably 100 or more now. It's going to go up. I would guess $130, $150 a barrel. Is that unlikely? So at $45 a barrel, they're making money. They start making money. He is making money hand over fist. And we're going to get more to oil here in a bit. This is one of the latest maps. I think it was a week ago. Just look at the blue and the red just moving in. Interesting though, look at the blue. They're mostly all airplanes. There's shipment of arms with the rifles and stuff, but they're mostly airplanes. All the other ones are convoys of stuff coming in by trains and stuff. There's a new airstrip built in Belarus. There's the Russian ships amassing in the North Baltic, and Russia signs agreement with the Minsk to send Belarusian troops to Syria. This was more than about 2 weeks ago now. I showed this up. I put this up here because Belarus is their puppet now, and basically, you know, if Russia wanted to, they could say, "I think we're going to stay here in Belarus. We'll just stay here. You can be my, you know, like prime minister of Belarus, but I'm in charge." This is from today. This is where the Russian troops are at. Surrounding. See Moldova? You can't, there's a big problem in Moldova. And I think it might be even a little bit bigger than that. There's, I think, a little bit bigger problem in Ukraine already as well. You can see the Donetsk over there, the little pink area. I think that problem is a little bit bigger than that. There's people that have infiltrated Ukraine. So we'll see. I'm sure they're working. I'm sure the police force in Ukraine are working hand over fist to find these people before this starts. 87 battalion tactical groups, or 147,800 military personnel, including aviation and naval components. So that's the latest number that I saw. It was 135 a couple days ago. Su-35s and Su-25s, I think. The Frogfoot, they call it, and the Sukhois moved into Belarus. So that's massive there. That's a big, huge, look at, that's just on the north there. So Russia's, that's going to be a very, very key point of interest, and it's only, I can't remember how far it is from Kiev, but it's only a couple hundred miles maybe. So Kiev's just basically on the other side of the border. So this is a centralized, pinpointed area. Let me show you this. Where that Sukhoi is, or this red thing, Kiev is right there. And so they're flying in all those, all that equipment. The West is flying in all that equipment to Kiev. So you can see how close the border is there. Important discovery. It looks like the bulk of the 1st Guards tank army is deploying to border areas in Belgorod region. District level assets such as high-power artillery are also deployed in this area, indicating this is to be a key sector in the Russian plans. That's Belarus, that's that area. So now you have to remember, how many tanks, who has the most tanks in the world? Russia, by far. They have the best, they have the most tanks in the world. I watched reports and looked at reports, and they put our Abrams tank and our newer tanks up against their Russian tanks, and in some areas Russians come out on top. The United States still has a really, really good tank. There's one problem. It's way over here. There's some in Germany and some other places, they wouldn't use them anyway, unless they gave them to the Ukrainians, and that's not going to happen. They can have our Stinger missiles and our Javelins, which are a lot. The two biggest things that are being sent into Ukraine right now are Stinger missiles, which are anti-aircraft missiles, and the Javelins, which take out tanks. And almost anybody can shoot a Javelin. It's like shooting a rifle. And you just point and shoot with a little bit of training. And they're training citizens. Here's a Javelin. And they will kill a tank. They'll take it out. And that's, interestingly, remember, Obama wouldn't send them. And then Trump was the one who said, hey, you said you were going to do something. I am doing it. You know, here they are. And he sent a bunch of Javelin missiles to Ukraine. So, and there's a lot more coming. This is a missile defense system, Russia's, going across one of the highways in that same area. And they have the S-400s in Belarus, anti-air defense systems. So, U.S. rejects Russia's claim that a Virginia-class sub entered Russian waters. Now, this has been going on for about 3 days, if I remember right. The Russians claim we saw a Virginia-class sub enter the Russian waters. And again, on Jack and Amir's update, they're saying, you know, now Russia has, Russia has the ability to track our subs, and they do. However, we have to be careful because what Russia is doing is sending out red flags. They call them false flags, I should say. False flags, and saying, see what the United States is doing, we have a right to retaliate in some way. The United States is saying there's no truth to the Russian claims of our operation in territorial waters. And so this is happening with the United States. It was happening with Ukraine over the last few weeks. Putin is saying that they're going to say we're doing certain things in Ukraine when we're not, and when they actually are. So the Russians are lying. We hope the United States isn't lying, but we do hope that they are doing some of these things and not letting Russia scare them off. But when the U.S. comes out and says we're not doing it, then it points to Russia saying, okay, well, they are, and we have a right to respond. So they just hype up these tensions. The EU is drawing up emergency contingency plans to protect Europe's borders, households, and businesses in the event of a full-blown Russia conflict. Under examination are how to handle migrant crisis and limiting soaring energy prices. See what? This is interesting because this is really playing into Russia's hands and China's hands, Iran's hands, all of our enemies' hands, all of the East's hands, the West, saying, hey, we're going to send Ukrainian immigrants your way. You're going to take them. And people are going to leave. They're going to leave because they're afraid. In fact, people already are. But I'll show you what class of people are ahead of everybody else. So there's just a picture of the red and the blue. The red and the blue. The government of Ukraine allocates $16.6 billion worth of Ukrainian money from the state budget reserve to guarantee the insurance of passenger aircraft in country's airspace. The measure has the goal to stabilize the passenger air transportation market. As of today, I think it might have been yesterday, but today for sure, that many transports now, many civilian cargo or passenger planes and organizations are not flying into Ukraine. Because why? The insurance companies said, we're not going to insure your planes if you're flying into that dangerous area. So now the Ukraine itself is the first one to step up and say, okay, we'll subsidize you, we'll insure you. It's going to be interesting to see what other countries do to make this happen. But isn't that interesting that now they're shutting down? And remember what the U.S. said. We won't have a way to get you out. A couple weeks ago when I did the update, I reminded you of what had happened in Afghanistan. Are you going to be able to get our people out? You better have a way to do that. So we'll see what happens there. Canada, and so I just used Canada as the latest. This was today. Canada, the UK, you just go down the list. Canada pulls troops out of Ukraine as a result of the complex operational environment linked to Russia's unwanted aggression. So they had the civilians move, but now they're moving their troops. We said, well, maybe we thought we didn't have troops in Ukraine. We have advisory troops, we have training troops, we have, these kinds of troops. They're not really meant to go up against Russia, and nor in the treaties, that we have, do we want to. And we don't want them injured or whatever, but you can see that Canada, UK, Russia, Germany, anybody who had troops in Ukraine are pulling those troops out. So, increase now, so here's the first class of people leaving. Increased business aviation activity in Ukraine reports of multiple tycoons leaving. So the poor people can't get out because we're not going to insure your planes. But the tycoons are saying, fire up the jets, like Putin's yacht. They're firing up their jets, and you can see the traffic, see the number of planes there. I don't know if exactly what kind you can see the bigger airlines and things like that, but you can see the red one was this passenger jet here. So, I mean the private jet. Israeli Foreign Minister Lapid says that from talks Israel had with Biden administration and diplomatic and intelligence channels, the window for getting Israeli citizens out of Ukraine is very narrow. I tell Israelis in Ukraine, come, watch this. What's the word? Yalla? Is it yalla? Go up. Come up. Come back home before it gets complicated. And it was at this point our minds go back to how many Jews are in America. Half of the world's Jews, generally, are in America. What's going to make them go back? What's going to make them go up to Jerusalem? I wanted to remind you of this. Now, this is the Caspian Report, so I just wanted to remind you that this is their map, his map there. And the idea that what he wants, those are the Carpathian Mountains in the light green. So basically, there's no troops coming, going between those two areas there. So it's that narrow area there, and you can see the enclave of the exclave of Russia up there. So it's that yellow area that he's concerned about. He wants to shut down that large area, and when he does that, then listen. This is important. When he does that, and he can just cover that little green area up there, now, with either jets or missiles or whatever he wants, he's got the little red area up there, he's got the Baltic, he's put his ships up there in the Baltic. So now he can focus his other troops anywhere he wants. That's why I called this update, Everything is Going South. Because everything's going south, as we say. It's going bad, but he's headed south. Now the question is, does he know it yet? And remember, Magog in Ezekiel 38 says a thought will come into his mind. At what point does that happen? I believe that when God says it's time, that he's not that smart, but something will happen on the planet where he says, hey, I can turn my thoughts south and go get all of this oil and gas that's just sitting there, and besides other, lots of gold and all of that kind of stuff in the south. So that's the idea there. So here's the map, and I drew this myself, but I did take the hook from Missler's. I think it was Missler's. He's got that hook there. It's kind of, it looks like a hook, but it looks like a nose. But they're coming down from the north, and they're coming from the east and the southwest. And so think with me now. When oil prices go through the roof, the worst thing could be that Putin goes and takes the oil. If it's $150 a barrel and there's nobody to stop him, and by the way, it probably goes up to 200 if he goes to the south, to be honest. There's nobody to stop him. Now, this is not likely now, given so much civil war, but it could be a catalyst. So what do I mean by civil war? We're going to get into those places now. Let's go back here. Actually I don't have it. So Put, which is Libya, the North Africa area, and Kush, which is Sudan and Ethiopia area. You have Libya, Persia, which is Iran, and Meshech. Meshech is probably more into the Caucasus. Tubal is more in the Caucasus area. I just have them there. Gomer is Ukraine, could be the Ukrainian area, and over in that Romania area. But we know that Rosh is north, and he's the head. He's the head. This is the military cargo airlifts into Ukraine. And the blue is the UK. Look at the number of UK flights. And then the red is the United States. And then there's other colors there. But you can see all the flights going into these two central areas, Kiev, which is very dangerously close to the border, and that other place, I can't remember the name of it, in the east there, which there really is kind of the eastern capital. They're actually moving a bunch of embassies temporarily over that way to keep it out of the war zone. So we'll see what happens. There's a huge river, the name of the river escapes me, runs through Ukraine, runs through Kiev, goes north and south, and that could be a border where Russia says, I want this area. But I think they're further west in Belarus, up there, above those red and blue lines in that clear area. That's Belarus, and they've got troops all along those borders. So they're probably going to take the north and the east for sure, Kiev on down to Crimea, at least. The Carpathians run. You can actually see the Carpathians there, in that right there. So they could keep going. They could go to Moldova. That's the big question. How far will they go, and what does Putin want? And if there's nobody stopping this guy. He could probably do what he wants. If he comes against the West, a Western treaty country with NATO, then that's going to be problematic for him. That's going to be a big deal. That's World War. So, but that's probably not going to happen. I don't think he wants a world war. So, I just want to remind you of Foot and Libya, Kush. Those are the areas coming down. Russian minister says the UK-Russia ties is close to zero. So now, let's transition. You got the East and the West. So you say Russia and UK ties are close to zero. I would say it's the same with the United States. It's better for them with Germany, because Germany's been trying to, But now let's think about it this way. Now you've got Gog, Magog, Russia up here, and you've got the Dan and Sheba and ships of Tarshish in the south. And that's UK, right? America, UK, and the merchants of Tarshish and the young lions are in the south. So we have to transition, think of it this way, but that's not the end game. Things are going to go south. Okay, and that's the idea. The head of occupation authorities in part of Donetsk, Ukraine, eastern Ukraine region, says he would like to see Ukraine as part of the union state between Belarus and Russia. So they've already got problems in Ukraine. The Russian army disrupts GPS systems in Israeli airspace and endangers landings at Ben Gurion Airport. Israel demanded a halt, but the Russians refused on the grounds that it was a defensive action. So a couple weeks ago, remember, we mentioned, and it's actually been several weeks when this first came about, we've been mentioning this, that the Russians took the port of Latakia. They just don't have an airport, an airport there. They have the port, they're policing the port there. Assad really is not the president there. Russia is running that port. They're running the really north of Lebanon. And now, of course, we knew, several years ago they had the flags on the Golan Heights in Syria, southern Syria. And they've been pushing on the United States to get out of the Kurdish areas as they push to the Euphrates, building more bridges over the Euphrates and all that kind of stuff. So now it's continuing to move south. Now this is the physics idea, right? Equal and opposite reaction. And I just happened to find a picture that had the red, the Russians. So the Russians are going to come and bang the West, and I'm not sure they really have 4 over there. It's probably 3-1, right? But you got the Russians that are going to come and bang the West. Now what? I've introduced this idea here a couple weeks ago, and I want to keep this in your mind here, okay? Because there's an equal and opposite reaction in physics. But in God's world, there's a reaction. He wants a reaction. God is forcing a reaction in the West. And again, I believe that after Magog gets through with his stuff and Gog, then the Antichrist will rise in the West and fill that void that God made when he destroyed those troops. And he will set up, he will strengthen a treaty with many. And he will set up this idea that we're here to save you, we're here to help you, and then he will invade the Middle East. So here's the opposite reaction from Russia and Iran. Okay, here's what's happening in the south. Or up there first, in the north. Finland has finalized its $9.4 billion purchase of 64 Lockheed Martin F-35s. That's a lot. And support services signing a letter of offer and acceptance on the 11th that calls for jets to be delivered before the end of 2030. Might be too late. But it's the idea, actually, that Finland, and by the way, Finland is not part of NATO. Finland is neutral. But they're so concerned about Russia that they've taken up NATO's cause. And so they are the buffer, and to be frank, the EU and NATO has taken up Finland's cause because Finland is the buffer zone in the north, in the extreme north, between Russia and the West. So Finland has taken up the F-35s. The F-35A conventional takeoff jets will be a Block 4 configuration and replace Finland's FA-18, which are, again, are United States fighters. Those are Navy fighters, which will be phased out as the new aircraft arrive starting in 2025. In addition to providing Finland with a 5th-generation fighter, the deal will provide Finnish companies high-tech engineering and manufacturing economic benefits. So there's the tit for tat. Okay, Finland says we're gonna buy F-35s. We've already mentioned that this is happening. Now in the south, here's another tit for tat. France to help the UAE secure airspace from when the United States stepped out. Now the United States is stepping back in, but when they stepped out and said we don't want to help Saudi Arabia and we're putting the Houthis, we're taking the Houthis off the terrorist list, well then France says, well let me step in, and others. The UK is stepping in. The UAE announced the interception and destruction on Wednesday of 3 hostile drones, which follows 3 previous drone and missile attacks claimed by Yemen's Iran-backed Houthis rebels January 17th. And by the way, they came from, remember, they came out of Iraq and came south. To show our solidarity with this friendly country. France has decided to provide military backing, notably to protect their airspace from any intrusion, she tweeted. France is also helping the UAE with aerial surveillance using Rafale fighter jets stationed at France's airbase in Abu Dhabi. So again, keeping track of this, UK has moved a base down there. The Canadians are moving. They're a big military. UK is moving a big base out of Canada into the UAE area. So the Young Lions are strengthening the South because of Iran in particular. And I think some of our leaders, they understand that Russia is kind of behind this and they're a problem. They're a big problem, but they're going to find out more and more Russia is the problem. And so this tit for tat is going to strengthen the West, I believe, as the Antichrist rises. And again, I want to go real caveat here. I want to remind you that, remember, does the Antichrist just come out of nowhere and all of a sudden he leads a world power? That has to build up somewhere, and there's 10 kingdoms and all this stuff. And I believe he gets strengthened and he gets rich and he gets powerful. And so you've got the West and you've got the South that the West are building against these Axis powers, if you will. Here's another one. Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz met with the King of Bahrain. Israelis and Jews. Arabs and Jews, strengthening this coalition. Benny Gantz met with the King of Bahrain and signed with him a historic security cooperation agreement. This is huge. UAE is leading the way with these guys. Now Bahrain is stepping in. Saudi Arabia is pretty close. But this southern coalition, the Dan and Sheba and the ships of Tarshish are strengthening as well. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman said on Thursday, once again, we are insistently calling upon the Israeli side to refrain from such use of force. The Prime Minister highlighted the UK's partnership with the Gulf Cooperation Council and intention to agree a new UK Sea Gulf Council deal. Downing Street said Mr. Johnson concluded the conversation with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia by the, which one is this? One of the Crown Princes. Anyway, by expressing hopes of meeting him in person at the earliest council. So watch this. The Prime Minister highlighted UK's partnership with the Gulf Council. And we believe, I think some of us believe, that Tarshish, it moved because they were on ships. So they moved their city, their capital, their culture west. And they were in the southern islands, and I think they moved to Spain, and then I believe that they ended up in the UK. And the reason I say that is because tin is mentioned in the Bible, and one of the prolific areas of tin is the UK. And so now you've got the Tarshish and the ships of Tarshish. Whatever you may think, it's this idea that they have all the ships, Isaiah chapter 2. The ships of Tarshish, Isaiah chapter 11, I think, as well. But they have the ships of Tarshish. These people have all these merchant ships, have all this military power. And so it's UK and the Young Lions, I believe. I still believe that. So now, wow, Tarshish currently pushing back in Ukraine and the Gulf. So solidifying the idea that Russia hates these people and will at some opportunity take what he can get. And at some point it will be oil. The UAE's staunch ally, the United States, staunch ally, has deployed a warship and fighter planes to help protect the Middle East, financial hub, usually a safe haven in the volatile region. So now the United States is saying, okay, maybe we made a mistake on the Houthis. We need to come back and protect UAE against the Houthi attacks. And so that strengthens that coalition. Now, on to Iran, the Fresno Bee. Iran typically welcomes the U.S. sanctions relief, but says more is needed. This can be interpreted as a sign of goodwill, but the Americans must show this is a practice and not just on paper, Iranian minister said. He said Tehran needed to see tangible results and that the U.S. should ease up in other economic areas as well, according to this agency. The sanctions relief is intended to encourage Iran to comply with the agreement. Again, Friday's move lifts sanctions against other countries and international companies linked to Iran civilian nuclear activities. You remember South Korea, and now the United States is lifting the sanctions, and it's over. So yeah, we may be helping the UAE, but now we just hurt them because we just took the sanctions off of Iran. And what are they going to do? We're going to use it for terror. They're the #1 state-supported terror system. Iranian Army Chief of Staff Mohammad Bagheri. If the criminal sanctions are lifted, and now they are, Iran will be the largest arms supplier in the world, apart from the 3 largest powers in the world. Even the big countries in Europe will not have our power. So this is the lunacy of our government, of our commander-in-chief, and it's very frightening. An activist hack organization revealed a highly sensitive Iran Islamic Revolutionary Guards document last week asserting that Iranian society is in a state of explosion. I'm not going to go into this real much, but the people of Iran are just sick and tired of the government. They're poor. They didn't have electricity during the winter. They didn't have oil and gas and those kinds of things, even though they have a lot of it. And they're sick of it. So it's going to be interesting to find out what happens, because we know this Islamic society has to maintain itself through Ezekiel 38. I'm just showing you what's happening in Syria, still going on with Turkey coming down and Russia fighting them. It's basically Russian fighting Turkey, basically. They're using militias and stuff, but this is not put together for Ezekiel 38 war. Libya, you can see the different colors. That's all I have to point out. This is still a disaster. Now, there are some things happening in Libya that are going to loosen this up maybe a little bit. The elections train in Libya has started, and a committee member, 5+5, getting foreign forces and mercenaries out of Libya is currently difficult and needs a sovereign decision. So there's a huge problem in Syria, a huge problem in Libya, and people will say, well, Syria is not mentioned in Ezekiel 38. Well, I would say two things. Number one, the Golan Heights are, how do you get to the Golan Heights? Through Lebanon and Syria. Number two, I believe Isaiah 17 is part of this whole issue. Remember, it's not just Damascus that falls. It's northern Israel through that area and over to Jordan. It's a huge area that gets damaged there. And then, just to shut it down here, in Sheikh Jarrah, back to this little city, it's actually just a neighborhood. And I remember, I called attention to this several months ago. It's a city, it's a neighborhood, let me show you. Real quick, this is just the lines, how the lines moved in all the wars. 47, the green line, 67, the purple line, and the orange line, 67. And so they kept taking property back. Israel kept taking property back as the Arabs would continue to try to decimate them. So they just kept taking property back. Now you see the old city there, okay? And just north of the old city there, you see the Alaska Mosque. Now you can see that neighborhood up north. Now what happened was, during the exile, basically, and then afterwards, after 1917 and other places, the Israelis still own their houses. They still own the land. So what they did, they had deeds to this property. And so when the Arabs moved in, they took these places. So now when the Israelis took these areas back and wanted their land back, the government had to step in and say, okay, what are we going to do about this? And they came up with the idea that as long as the people were alive and would pay rent, that they could stay on the land. But when that's over, they have to give the land back. And so that's now, I would say, Matthew 24, this generation. So now the Arabs are saying, no, this is my house, this is my land. And the Jews are saying, wait, this is the court order, it's in the courts, we want our land back. Some Arabs stopped paying rent, rent, and so this went into the courts, and the courts are saying, nope, this is Israeli land, give it back. But you know what's happening? The Arabs have moved in even more, and they're calling it Sheikh Jarrah al-Quds, Jerusalem. So now, al-Quds forces, Iran, Islamic Revolutionary Guards, al-Quds forces, they're militias and others. So now you can see that Iran is stirring this up. Okay? But watch this. Police say 12 arrested in Sheikh Jarrah for violent incidents today. The police are coming down. Israeli police are coming down on their heads. And one more thing I forgot to tell you, that a prime minister, a Knesset minister, one of the ministers moved into that neighborhood. And so they got violent, the Arabs got violent against him, and he said, police, come and help me. And so, so you can see what's happening in Israel. Finally, we'll finish with this. Matthew 24:4. And Jesus answered them, see that no one leads you astray. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and they will lead many astray. Time out. What's the word I'm looking for? The new apostolic movement. The Reformed movement, and I'm not talking about Reformed gospel as far as Luther and Calvin talked about. I'm talking about Reformed as far as displacing Abraham from his covenant with God. These kinds of things are deceiving people, and they are deceiving much of the church. Okay. So there would be deceivers, number one. Number two, you'll hear wars and rumors of wars. Anybody hearing that? Okay.
Oh.
Number three, see that you are not alarmed, for this must take place. But the end is not yet. So, okay, this is not the end. It's coming. Then nation will rise up against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. I keep looking at the earthquake map because I know if the earthquake is getting really, really bad, we're way down the road. We're not there yet. We're seeing wars and rumors of wars and deception. Just look inside the church. We're seeing those two things. So we are at the very beginning of the very end. That's the point. How much more do we have to endure? Well, we will have to endure. All of these are but the beginning of birth pains. Stay the course. Be strong and very courageous. Have the gospel shod feet. Have the shod feet of the gospel so that you can bring the peace to many. How can they hear unless one is sent? Okay? So we are all sent. Let's pray. Lord, we worship you and thank you for your grace and your mercy, Lord. Thank you for allowing us to know these things and see these things. We look forward to you coming back. Until then, warm our hearts with the gospel and restore our joy that we first had when we had the gospel, we heard the gospel, so that we can be helpful to others and a light to others, and they won't be afraid to approach us. We love you, Lord. We praise you. We worship you and honor you. Watch out for your church. You will. I'm not sure we even have to ask that, but we pray this in your holy name.